I met the previous occupant of my apartment. Turns out he never left. Story by J. Derek 29. My fingertips blindly brushed across the drywall for a few moments before finally feeling the light switch. In my old place, I would have made a nighttime expedition for the bedroom to the kitchen without the use of a light. But my current apartment is still unfamiliar, and I wasn't confident I could make the trip free of a stubbed toe or banged chin. So I squinted my eyes in preparation for the incoming light and placed my finger on the switch. "Please don't turn on the light." The request was at a volume not much louder than a whisper, but in the silent void of my living room it might as well have come through a megaphone. It jerked me from a state of semi-consciousness to stunned with fear in an instant. Cold sweat forming at my temples and the hairs on my arm and neck jumped to attention. The little force it would take to flip the lever at the tip of my finger completely left my body. "My name is Thomas," he said in a calm, measured tone. "I'm not going to hurt you, Adrian." A clear attempt to pacify me had the opposite effect. Hearing my name in the stranger's voice seemed to set the world at a slanted perspective, and I could feel the rhythmic thumping of my heart. Still, I couldn't force myself to move. "All I need you to do is listen for a few minutes," he said, still calm, but now mixed with a bit of desperation. "I actually lived in this apartment before you. I've actually been here for a few years, and I had no plans on leaving, but in March my landlord sold the building and new management took over. They informed me almost immediately when my lease was up in the summer there would be a significant rent hike. I was devastated. I was just barely able to afford the old rate. I was already working maximum hours at the store, and my bosses told us we shouldn't expect any raises this year. I looked at other nearby apartments, and it became apparent the entire area had crept out of my price range. Thinking over the possibility of starting somewhere new, I got desperate. About 6 weeks ago, when I was at my lowest, I made a mistake. I was lost in thought after work, and I hadn't noticed the flyer until the key was already in the knob. A neon pink paper, carefully taped to my door, cut through the dreadful thoughts of realtors and commuting costs. I pulled it off the door and read the header. "Ordinary people wanted for clinical studies!" Exclamation mark. The flyer was pretty light on information. It didn't explain what the study would be about, when it took place, or even include a phone number. It only included an address and how much they were paying people to participate. Before March, I probably would have ended up trashing the paper. But with my current situation, I couldn't turn down $1,500. It certainly wouldn't pay my raised rent, but combined with my income, it would buy me a few months to figure out what to do next. Without a listed time, I was worried I would miss my chance. Without even entering the apartment, I clutched the neon pink lifeline in my hand and made my way back to the car. The address on the paper was a little bit outside of city limits, but I made it there in 25 minutes. The place would have been a good example for the word nondescript. It was a large rectangular building with almost no details or design flair across its surface, just large mirrored windows in evenly spaced columns and rows across its surface. It was past regular business hours, and there were only a handful of cars parked outside. Still, I wasn't going to let a rising level of doubt or the strange feeling in my gut hold me back. Almost jumping out of the car, I rushed up to what appeared to be the only entrance. The door was made of the same mirrored glass that surrounded the building, but on the top half of the window was a logo and name of the company. A three-dimensional yellow and orange hourglass, where the lines overlapped and attached in an impossible way. The name Homa Dynamics printed beside it. The growing feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was off made it hard to breathe. Feeling myself losing the battle against it, I unfolded the flyer and reread the amount I would be paid. With my resolve restored, I pulled open the small door and entered a small reception area. "Welcome to Hemodynamics. Please fill out these papers." A young blonde woman in purple medical scrubs welcomed me from behind the desk. Pinned to the pocket on her medical garb was a name tag that read Nurse Mel. She also wore a small smile, but her uninterested eyes gave away it was performative. She rummaged through a filing cabinet for a moment and pulled out a clipboard. With her other hand, she grabbed a pen out of a coffee cup and held both in front of me. I grabbed them and made my way to a chair on the other side of the room. There were only 2 papers on the clipboard. The first was an information sheet that only asked for my name, address, and basic medical information. The second was a non-disclosure agreement. To fit it all on one page, they had printed it almost too small to read. I attempted to skim the NDA for a few seconds before giving up and signing. I got up to return the papers, but found Nurse Mel was already a few feet away from me, her hands outstretched for the clipboard and pen. She took a quick moment to look over the paperwork. When she was satisfied, she placed the pen in her breast pocket and brought the clipboard to her side. "Follow me, Thomas," she said, beginning to head deeper into the building. "Please keep in mind that by signing this paperwork in my hands, you have agreed to not discuss anything you see in this facility. If you do disclose any information to industry professionals, members of the media, or personal acquaintances, you will be breaking this agreement and be open to legal consequences. Do you have any questions for me at this time?" While she explained the agreement, we moved at a brisk pace down identical sterile hallways. The concrete block walls, laminate floor, and foam tile ceiling were an identical color of white. Heavy metal doors painted the same color and fluorescent light fixtures were evenly spaced throughout the hallways. It only took a few turns to feel disoriented, and I wondered if we were going in circles. "What is the study about?" I asked. "What am I going to be doing?" Nurse Mel stopped beside a door, no different than the many we already passed. She placed her hand on the doorknob and pushed it open. Turning towards me, she made a motion with her hands indicating I should enter. "Information necessary for your participation in the study will be given when it begins. Please keep in mind that in order to protect our proprietary information, the full context of the study will not be revealed to you." I stood for a moment wondering if Nurse Mel would say anything else. I was met with the same static smile and look of disinterest I had gotten used to from her. Knowing I wouldn't be getting any answers, I stepped through the doorway, a rush of air hitting my back as the door closed quickly behind me. The room I stood in made me feel foolish for considering the hallway devoid of detail. Everything from the floor to ceiling was made of the same white plaster. The room was lit by 4 lights recessed into the ceiling in each corner of the room. In the entire space, there were only 2 objects that really stood out. The first being a camera mounted high on the wall directly in front of me, and the other a pull-chain light hanging from a cord in the middle of the room. Besides feeling a bit out of date, the light fixture hanging from the ceiling wasn't that odd. What hung in place of a normal bulb was what drew the eye. It wasn't an average glass bulb, or even one of those fluorescent ones that snakes around itself. Instead, screwed into the socket was a 10-sided object, made out of grey material that looked like carbon fiber. Each of the 9 sides, attached to the light fixture, had a quarter-sized glass peephole that reminded me of portholes on a boat. Even from the door I could see a strange swirl of colors moving around the inside of the closest hall. "Place your hand on the chain, but do not pull the chain," a heavily distorted voice demanded from the camera. I was still mesmerized by the colorful movement inside the object and jumped when the voice started talking. I was just recovering from the sudden confusion when the voice repeated its order, but this time with frustration noticeable through the distortion. "Place your hand on the chain, but do not pull the chain." This time I followed the order, walking up to the object and grabbing the beaded metal chain. As soon as my hand got its grip, the voice from the camera returned. "The lights will shut off.
Do not let go of the chain or pull the chain.
The moment the last word was said, the room was bathed in complete darkness. The only lights remaining were the echo of the fluorescent in my eyes. The gut feeling I had pushed out of my mind was back with a vengeance, begging me to leave. But before I could act on it, the voice shot through the darkness with a final order.
Pull the chain now.
Without a thought, I pulled the chain and the room filled with a light I'd never seen before. From the same source, lights of many different colors tie-dyed the room. They moved, swirling and twisting off one another in a way that was not planned or completely chaotic, like the colors were alive. But it only lasted a few seconds before a loud pop came from the object and the room was once again dark. After a moment of confused darkness, the fluorescent lights that originally lit the room turned on. I turned at the sound of the door behind me opening and saw Nurse Mel standing outside it with the same disinterested smile. I must have followed her back through the hallway maze to the reception area, but I don't have a clear memory of the trip. I do remember her handing me a check for the full amount on the flyer, and then I must have made my way to the car in the parking lot. My first clear memory after the study was pulling into the parking lot for my apartment. I had the visor pulled down because at some point during the trip the moonlight coming through the windshield was too bright. I think I had a day or two of normalcy, but I find it hard to remember a lot of events after the study. At some point the migraine started. I'd be fine when I woke up in the morning, but when I'd walk into the sun, it felt like my head was filled with razor blades. I tried a few times to get to work, but I never got to the parking lot before feeling lightheaded and nauseous. More and more, I started sleeping all day with the curtains pulled. Dreams of dancing colors moving in a way that defied purpose and chaos. At some point, I no longer remembered going to sleep. I'd simply come to my senses in the apartment after sunset and lose myself in the colorful void when it rose. I started worrying about brain tumors or some other awful disease messing with my brain. But I had missed too many days of work, and any treatment would empty whatever meager savings I had left. Not to mention most specialists working during the day, and the thought of going outside made me physically ill. Even going to the emergency room at night ran some risk of being caught out in the daylight. Near the end of any semblance of normalcy, I tried to get into contact with hemodynamics. The colors that now plagued me had originated in their study, but even a deep search online turned out next to nothing on the company. I found a few links to personal stories posted on boards around the internet, but at that point, the glow of the screen was starting to hurt my head as bad as the sun. I started spending my nights in total darkness. I didn't realize how bad it was until I came out of the void of dancing colors one night and realized I had been gone for more than a day. Everything I owned had been moved out and your things had taken their spots. I've tried to talk to you a few times, Aiden, but it is getting harder to pull myself back from the other side. And you are so rarely not bathed in some light source. I need your help, Aiden. I need you. I still don't know what made me flip that switch. Thomas had been talking for a while and I had calmed a bit from when I first heard his voice. Still, considering the content of the story, I was sure I'd find a half-crazed man on the couch. Instead, the room was empty. I spent a few minutes searching every corner of the apartment. There was no sign of anyone. A few days have passed and I have decided that Thomas wasn't a dream or auditory hallucination. He was really in my apartment, and he still might be. I've spent a few hours each night sitting in the dark listening for his voice. I have not had success yet, but I'm going to keep trying. I want to talk to him again and find out how I can help. My motives aren't totally altruistic though. I need answers of my own. I didn't acknowledge it right away, but when I hit the light, I think I saw him just for a second. In my head, I had the image of a man, a little older than me, on the couch. Only he wasn't right. Everything from his skin to his clothes were translucent. His outline, though, wasn't one color. Instead, it was many colors, moving in a pattern, neither purposeful or chaotic. More and more, I found myself dreaming of those dancing colors,